on Money Talk 1010 AM. It's the Morgan Streetman Show. Morgan and Roxanne Wilder are discussing everything from world, national, and local issues to information from the unknown. And since Morgan's an attorney, there'll probably be a little something from the law. Now, here are Morgan Streetman and Roxanne Wilder.
Oh, we have so much to get into today on the Morgan Streetman Show, but I've been listening to you and the Sarge, so getting caught up on some of the... I mean, you guys do everything. You did Golden Globes talk.
I tell you what. Well, I mean, Sarge really brings it, doesn't he?
He does.
I mean, every day he comes... I mean, he's just got so much content. Sarge is a machine.
Yeah, well, what you heard was only half of it.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
All the rest here.
That's what I'm saying. He comes in with a stack of papers like I used to do. I don't bring papers anymore. Now I got my little iPad thing that I'm working off of now.
Hey, I want to ask you this. If you guys are the A team, you know, you and Sarge, what is this team?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. What are we? We're not the B team, are we?
No, definitely not the B team.
Okay. Can't go downhill.
Is there anything better than A?
Well, maybe you've got to have two A teams.
We're not the Bucks team. We're definitely not the B
We're the
Bucks
triple
team.
A team.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
different league.
Triple A. Double A. At least.
Double A.
No. I think we're backing ourselves into a corner here.
Oh, God, we're not going to get out of this one. You were supposed to be on a cruise ship as far as I was aware today. That's what I was thinking.
No, next Friday.
I know.
Is
That's
it
what you
next
guys
Friday?
are telling me. It's just, it gets lost in translation when you tell me.
Do this, Pat. Why do you have to take your Fridays and Mondays off?
You know, that's what really bothers
right.
me. Why can't my favorite cruise be on a Tuesday to a Thursday?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
but no. Or a Monday afternoon, I'd leave and come back Thursday. That would be perfect.
They don't care down in Cozumel. You could party on a Tuesday in Cozumel.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You know, it doesn't have to be Friday or Saturday down there.
Right. You're right about that.
Oh.
But,
well, this is the first time we're all back together. I mean, it's been, this is 3 weeks now. We haven't
Is
been
it
together.
really?
Yeah.
Huh.
We did the Christmas Eve special.
Right.
And then we did the New Year's Eve special. And by we, I mean me.
And it's still a good fit?
What do you mean?
Still a good fit.
We can still work together.
Yeah,
we're all
exactly.
we're still
Nice
gelling
fit.
a little bit. Well, you know, I tell you, those special shows were a lot of fun. We were kind of kidding around, saying I came into the studio. Of course, this place was locked down tight.
Because
I mean, there was no
we
coming
have a radio shutdown over the holidays.
A big note
Nowhere
at the
That's
to
door.
right. You think the government shut down serious?
Oh,
Try
yeah.
getting
Just
into
have
the
a holiday
station
come
around the
around here.
holidays. Right. It's all on auto.
But you know what I like when you have to record those shows? Why don't you tell the audience about how much effort you put in those shows?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
Please.
Well, you guys, I mean, you wouldn't even believe it. I mean, the amount of effort that went into each of those 1 hour shows, and I'm just approximating here because I ended up, unfortunately, staying up all night, 2 nights to do those, 2 different nights, but 12 hours, round numbers, 12 hours per hour of content. And, you know, if you go and listen to those, which you can go out there and listen to them on morganstreetmedia.com, you can link to our YouTube page and pick up some of those old shows. You know, if you'll notice, I don't say one time in the entire thing.
You're so smooth. That's
I'm
why.
so smooth, and I'm so fast. There's barely any pauses
You don't
in
say
between.
like either.
I don't say...
You don't pepper in a bunch of likes.
All of my verbal crutches are removed through audio editing. It's a beautiful thing. But that's why it takes me...
You don't even take a breath.
I mean, exactly. That's why I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been talking forever. And when I tighten it up, I got like 5 minutes. And I'm like, wait a minute, I've said everything I want to say already. That's unbelievable. So it's crazy how much content you can cram in there when you're pre-taping. And, you know, an overwhelming perfectionist like I tend to be. And I'm not saying those shows were perfect, by the way.
What are you talking about, Morgan?
I'm not saying those shows were perfect, but they're as perfect as I could make them with my limited skill set. So, and we had some fun with it. And I tell you, one of the fun things that I did, and I'm so glad that my better urges prevailed on this particular instance, because if you remember the last time we were together, that was 3 weeks ago, Pat George, you asked me, do you think the government is going to get shut down?
And you said...
And I said, no. And of course, I just gave you my off the cuff. I don't, you know, I mean, I'm just guessing at it as well as anybody else. And, you know, then the next day, if you remember, the story read, the government's not going to get shut down. And I'm like, oh, nailed it again, Streetman. I'm like, look at that, man, I'm like a superstar.
You know what, though? Kudos to you right now for saying this, because whether it's a weather forecast or sports forecast, who's going to win the game, where the hurricane is going to end up, nobody comes on the next day and is accountable for giving the wrong answer to what actually happened. So good for you.
Well, you know, I'm always out front with my mistakes, or I try to be. And in this particular case, I almost doubled down on it, which would have been hilarious because, you know, again, we're pre-taping the show. So as of Tuesday, I'm like, oh, Streetman superstar. So I had planned to have one of the segments basically being like a let me show you when I said no, it wouldn't be shut down. And then look, it didn't get shut down.
Who thought this long, too?
Well, I know. But then it was like, schizophrenic Trump, which I think he's doing his like negotiating. You don't really know where I'm coming from. I said that we were going to have the shutdown. We weren't going to keep it going. And then his staff came out and said, no, they were going to keep it going. We weren't going to have the shutdown. And then now we're back to having the shutdown. So, I mean, I don't know if that's part of his strategy to keep people off balance. I mean, I know he certainly talks in that way, that his I shouldn't say strategy, I really should say tactics, that he applies the tactic of not letting you know where he's coming from.
Shrewd negotiator.
Yeah, it may be that, or it may be that really the Ann Coulters of the world and the Mark Meadows and the other folks kind of got to him on that day, because they were, that's what they were saying, Mr. President, if you don't do it now, we're never going to get this wall. And I'm not sure that we're ever going to get the wall. I mean, that all remains to be seen. But boy, I sure am glad I decided not to go with that segment. Even though I needed the content, I needed the time, I taped something else. So I'm glad I did that. Well, we want to jump into our local interest story here. And this is one, yesterday was the 112th annual Epiphany over in Tarpon Springs. Mm-hmm. Did you see that?
We did see that.
And the gentleman or the young man, I mean, I think he's 17 that won it. His name was el-Sisi, and I hope I got that close to right. He's actually,
sounds good.
Yeah, he was actually born in Greece and came over to Tarpon Springs when he was 3 years old. But this particular festival, which commemorates the baptism of Jesus, has been going on there at the St. Nicholas Cathedral for well over 100 years. And during the ceremony, if you're not familiar with it, I mean, there's 20,000 plus people that go over there to see it. And all the young Greek men of about 16, 17 years old, maybe 15 to 17 years old, it's kind of a thing for them. They want to get this cross. And the Archbishop...
It's good luck for a year.
That's right. If you get the cross, only one person gets it. They're supposed to get good luck for the entire year. So the primate, the main guy of the Greek Orthodox Church of America, which is His Eminence Archbishop Demetrios, he threw the cross in, and this young 17-year-old man, Ilias Skandaliaris, it's a tough one. Mm-hmm. I tell you what, it probably just rolls right off a Greek's tongue. But old Streetman from Mississippi is kind of tripping up on that one, and I practiced ahead of time. I practiced that name. I still can't get it down. There's too many vowels. A lot of syllables. Too many vowels. My mouth don't move that quickly. So anyway, he retrieved the cross. He got it. Congratulations to him. If you've never been out there to see it, I mean, it's a pretty cool thing. It's been going on forever, and it's something that, Tarpon Springs is particularly known for.
Did you see how quick he got it? That was record time.
Yes.
Less than a minute.
Right.
Good for him.
Right. Well, he's a real Greek. He's like, hey, I know exactly what to do here.
Well, but what about the controversy now?
Mm-hmm. There's some controversy.
Well, Roxanne.
The women want to be able to participate. The girls feel like they should dive as well. And
Why not?
Some people say, this in other places where they do the cross dive, they do allow women to dive. So,
Why not? What do you think, Streetman?
Well, this is a much more complicated question in today's world than it was, I'd say, just even 20 years ago, because now we've at least officially begun to really change the idea of the two separate genders, and the idea that there are, you are classified into one of two genders, as opposed to sort of a never-ending panoply of possibilities, So, I mean, at this point, it's getting to be a little bit, are they restricting just women? Or are they restricting people who have changed themselves from women to men, et cetera? I mean, it can be very complicated in today's world to decide this. I don't know why they don't just let everybody go for it if they want to. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I'm not one of those people who believes in forcing change on people. And so, you know what? If this is the way the Greek Orthodox community wants to run its Epiphany, and it's a male-only thing, and that's the way it's been traditionally, and it's been that way for over 100 years, I say let them do it. I mean, unless they want to make the change, I think we got to stop telling other people what to do in this country.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to look at things.
I think we got to stop doing that, because it's tearing us apart.
If they decide, that's a good idea, we should involve women as well, then that's
Sure.
one way to look at it.
Right. I mean, I certainly have no objection. So, anyway, that's what I think about it, Pat George. What do you think?
Well, I don't know, but I think that we might be surprised with the Academy Awards and who's going to run that show, too.
Ooh.
I think that could be changing.
Really?
Huh.
I think we might see Mr. Hart.
We have an answer.
Oh, coming back
Really?
now, huh?
Well, I don't have an answer yet, but they are pushing to make sure that, and it's just like you said, you can't tell people what they can't do.
Yeah.
You know, you can't say you can't be on the show.
Well, I'm glad you're following this for us, Pat George, because I've been unable to think about much else except for who's going to host the Oscars myself. I mean, I just don't know what I'm going to do with myself, so I'm glad we're going to chase this one down. Speaking of chasing things down, we got a story that we want to share with you about another little swimming creature, and you're not going to believe this one. You're not going to believe what somebody just paid for a fish in Japan. It's unbelievable. We're going to have that story when we come back for you on the Morgan Streetman Show.
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. Roxanne Wilder with you. Pat George is here. We're all back together again now to start the new year. We kind of had that wonky sort of week last week, and then here we go. This is how everybody feels. Back to the grind all week long, 5 days.
That's it. And we get one show with Pat George, and then he's going on a
I know.
cruise. Not cruising with Huge, just a regular cruise. And then he'll be back the week after that. So we're going to miss you next week, Pat George.
We sure
Thank
are.
you. I'm going to miss you. Well, a little bit, but I'll be on the cruise. I'll be having a good time. I'll be preoccupied.
You're going to miss us, but you're not going to miss tequila.
No.
Well,
It's been a good time.
we were talking about, swimming for crosses and things like that. And apparently there are real treasures in the sea. I mean, who knew this? Who knew the treasures that the sea holds? Now, this next story that we wanted to bring you, it's just unbelievable to me because it's about a fishmonger's auction in Tokyo, Japan. And every year, at the beginning of the year, they have the very first auction of the year for the first bluefin tuna that is sold that year. Now, these tuna are huge, all right? You're talking about something that's well over 500 pounds. The one in particular was 278 kilograms, which is about 613 pounds.
I don't picture those fish getting that large.
Oh, they're giant. They're
Didn't
giant.
realize that.
Yeah, tuna are just about at the top of the food chain in the ocean. Anyway, this tuna that was auctioned off on, a couple days ago is the most expensive tuna ever auctioned. Do you want to know what it went for? $3.1 million.
What?
$3 million
612 pounds.
for a 600-pound fish.
Oof.
I mean, that's unbelievable. How could you get enough meat off of that fish to make your money back? I mean,
I
to
know.
make millions of dollars on a fish. And it may be that this particular auction doesn't wind up to be the most profitable effort that this gentleman's ever made because he's kind of a serial auction winner. So I think he does this probably for publicity for his particular chain of restaurants. His name is Kiyoshi Kimura. And it's actually this particular sum. This is over 333 million yen. Okay? This is double the previous record, which was set in 2013. Now, can you imagine that? So the previous record must have been about something like 1.6 million US dollars equivalent in yen for bluefin
Per pound.
tuna. Well, not per pound, thank God.
Right, not per pound, but I mean pound to
For the
ratio.
for the whole
right.
thing. For the whole thing. Thank God. So it's about half as much, but
If that one was 600 pounds,
oh
basically.
my gosh.
And when
yeah.
you watch this, the fishermen only get maybe $7,000 or $8,000 for that tuna when they go to market.
Oh yeah?
That's what they pay them, depending on the fat in the more fat, the good fat, and the way the meat looks. They might get 10, maybe 12,000 for a really good one. But I've seen this fish this size, and that's what they get. And this one's $3 million.
$3 million for a dead fish? I mean,
And
come
that
on.
fish
Are you
may have a
kidding
little
me?
funky stuff in it from the
Are you kidding me?
Fukushima, right?
Well, that's right. Over there, it could be full of radiation for all we know. I mean, they're the apex predator in the ocean over there. I mean, leaving aside the sharks and stuff, but they would accumulate a lot of things. Like we've all heard tuna, mercury. You remember that from when you were going through your thing and you were not supposed to eat
my pregnancy
your
thing.
pregnancy
Yeah,
thing.
when you're going through your thing. Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to think. Is there a nice way to say that? Am I supposed to just
all you
be
have to
like,
say is when you were pregnant.
when you were pregnant? Okay. Well, it felt very personal all of a sudden, Roxanne. I'm like, I don't. Maybe I shouldn't say
when
that.
you were going through that thing you did.
When she was getting ready to be a mommy.
There
Yes.
you go.
Oh, when
Pat
I was
George.
creating life inside my
There
body.
you go, right. who this young lady's turned out to be quite the little.
Sassy
She could be a female version of Streetman.
She's a firecracker, huh?
Oh, yeah.
I haven't been over to see her in a while.
You've got to come back over.
I need to get back over there. I understand she really loves watching Bobby Rich.
Oh, she's obsessed with Bobby Rich.
And I'm kind of jealous. I'm like, man, I'm just
he has
not
a lot
getting
of
enough
hair.
Exposure. That's right. Well, look at my hair. I got hair. You want hair? I got hair. Well, one of the interesting things this price highlights, I think, is this idea. When we hear about prices going up, we tend to think that the prices are increasing. So the price of goods is going up. But what's actually happening, unfortunately, is that the value of the dollar is going down. That's what's really happening. So this highlights that because now, just since 2013, the bids on these tuna, the maximum bids, have doubled. And that tells you a little bit about something about what's going on with the money supply in the world with this whole easy money policy that we've had going on since, well, it was really before the beginning of President Obama's first term that they started QE, quantitative easing, which again we call easy money because that's what it really is. And of course, during essentially the entire Obama presidency, they had the Fed funds rate. That's the lending rate at which all the other rates are based at essentially zero, which meant that borrowing money didn't cost anything basically. And so we had a lot of inflation during that time period. And I wanted to sort of circle back because I talked a lot about that during our specials. And if you're interested in economics like I am, I studied economics in school, graduated with an economics major. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, I'd urge you to go back and listen to our Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve specials because we did cover some very interesting economic views on this and some ways of understanding this and thinking about it, including, calling to your attention the fact that, and now we're going back 3 or 4 weeks because, Pat, you were here for this, but going back and looking at the differences in price between the year 1800 and 1900 versus 1900 to 2000. And if you remember when we did that, the difference between 1800 and 1900 is that it was slightly less expensive in 1900. Mm-hmm. But the difference between 1900 and 2000 was that it was about 20 times more expensive by the time we got to 2000. So what changed? And what's the natural order of things? And one of the reasons I want to circle back on this is because one of the things that I explained is the way that price inflation or the loss of value of the money supply actually takes money away from people who have saved their money. And I talked about the fact that this inflation has caused the stock market to go through the roof and continue to hit new highs and new highs. But what I was wanting to highlight in particular, because I'm not anti-capitalist or anti-free market, and we talked about the rich getting richer, but what I kind of wanted to highlight for folks is that if you're working a job and you are not accumulating a lot of your income over time, so you're basically living what they call paycheck to paycheck, and that's like 60 or 70% of America or maybe more lives paycheck to paycheck. So that's most working people. Most of us are living paycheck to paycheck. If that's you, probably the only thing you have the opportunity for is to save a little bit of money. Now, whatever you put back, $1,000 here, $1,000 there, as this price inflation goes absolutely bananas, your $1,000 becomes worth almost nothing. So you might as well not have even saved that. It disincentivizes you to even save anything that you've earned.
So what do we do? Spend it all now?
Well, I mean,
put it in the mattress.
Do you see that the market?
No, that's still saving it.
Well, yeah, and the market, you see, is forcing you to make irrational choices. Instead of saving, you'd be better off to blow it now because if you save it, it ain't going to be worth anything. That is not a good system. That's an unsustainable system.
Okay.
We don't want to be set up that way. We want to encourage saving.
But as we get more into inflationary periods, won't then interest rates go up and we will be incentivized to save?
Well, okay, but look at the pricing.
Mr.
Inflation rates are a measure, and they're based on different inputs, including pricing and things. But, for example, in our consumer price index, they've taken out of the inflation measure, they've taken out things like energy and food. And that's what most working people spend most of their income on, is energy and food. And we've all seen the inflation that's occurred in that, particularly in food. I mean, food's been unbelievable, the differences 20 years ago what you would spend to go to the grocery store versus today. But I want to circle back to this because we were talking about people with their money in the market and how, the kind of all ships rise with the tide because of this flood of money that's coming in. And a lot of folks got to experience the benefit of that. I personally I'm not a market guy. I'm not a stocks guy. So me and Pat George, we're hanging out on the beach.
I knew it.
We saw that ship come in and we weren't on it. That's for sure. And there was nothing on it for us. So we didn't get in on that. And that's what I'm trying to say. Most people didn't get in on that. Now, I've got friends and clients and everything else and folks who made a ton of money, quote unquote, over the years being in Amazon. Like if you're in Amazon over the last 10 years, you made a fortune, and these folks are loving it. But they have to understand they're very privileged to have been able to make enough money so that they could play with some of it in the stock market and experience this kind of what they perceive to be wealth creation, which is really the destruction in the purchasing power of the dollar. But because they get to hold assets that are purchased in dollar prices, or what we call denominated in dollars, because they get to hold those assets, their asset value increases as the dollar gets less valuable. But if all you get to hold is your $1,000 in your mattress, your asset values don't increase as your dollars get less valuable.
So again, you made a really good point. This is a bad system to be in when you're forced to make irrational choices. So we have to remind each other of that again. But think about this. You should be spending your money at this point in time the way the dollar is valued on yourself.
Yeah, right.
Your health, better foods,
that's right,
taking good care of yourself, investing in your skill set, and then when things stabilize, then you can make the choice, a rational choice, savings or XYZ.
Right. And of course, one of the biggest keys to that, to getting yourself into that position, is to have a budget, get yourself out of debt. Now I'm thinking about Dave Ramsey that we were listening to coming into this, a couple of hours ago. I was listening to it. And, he's really got the best system. We got a lot more to cover for you, including Russian hacking of our election when we come back on the Morgan Streetman Show. And welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We're back live in studio with Roxanne Wilder and Pat George. And, of course, you can find all of our previous shows, well, not all of them, but a lot of them you can find online at www.morganstreetmedia.com. And you can link to our
Check out the YouTube channel there.
That's right. We've got a YouTube page. We've got SoundCloud. If you want to do live streaming, we've got a radio.co radio station set up for you that's running our greatest hits and stuff like that. So lots of options out there if you want to listen to some of our past content. And while you're out there, give us a like and a subscribe because it helps other people to find us. If YouTube thinks that, hey, folks like this content and they want to see more of it, then they'll start to serve it out to more people, and we can grow our audience a little bit and keep spreading the good word.
You said you have a radio station playing music?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Who's selecting
Not
the song?
music, sorry. Did I say music?
Yeah, you said music.
No, greatest hits, I said. Our greatest hits.
Oh, those
not our
greatest
musical
hits.
greatest
You
hits.
can hum along to what we're
That's
saying.
right.
I was going to say,
but-
I know what you listen to.
Wait a minute. What do I listen to?
You listen to some crazy stuff.
Oh, come on now. You're going to make everyone think I listen to death metal or something. What are you talking about?
No, you're an old rock and roller. Like,
I love rock and roll.
yes.
Well,
You
I
have
like
to check
a lot
out
of music.
our new station here at Beasley Media Group.
Oh, yeah. 98.7 The Shark.
Yes. That's a Shark Tank right behind us.
It's got an edge. Watch out. The shark will bite you if you're not careful.
Taking a bite out of Tampa Bay.
I'm sure the puns never stop around here on that one. Yeah.
We have some fun with that.
Hey, all you hammerheads, listen to that station.
That's right. Forget the knuckleheads. Now we got a bunch of hammerheads is what we got to deal with around here. But, this next story I wanted to share with you, which I mean, look, we've told you about this ad nauseum around here. But if you just read the headlines, you wouldn't necessarily think we knew what the heck we were talking about. It's like, well, goodness gracious. I mean, all these major news organizations, they wouldn't be acting like there's a bunch of Russia collusion if there wasn't a bunch of Russia collusion, right? I mean, you remember when they were interviewing Sundar Pichai? Gerald Nadler was asking him questions. Maybe it wasn't, anyway, whoever it was, I think it was Gerald Nadler, was asking him questions, and he said how much was spent on Google ads by the Internet Research Agency. Remember that? It was like $4,700.
Right.
And he was even like, you mean like $4,700? And he's like, that's right. Well, if that's all they spent on Google, I mean, let's face it, what effect could they possibly have had? But now I wanted to share something with you. This is an article that just came out in a magazine called The Nation. You ever heard of The Nation? If you haven't heard of it, it's a very left-leaning, if you want to call it progressive, if you want to call it liberal, whatever you want to say, it fits all of those categories. It is extremely left-leaning news organization, though. And they just came out with a headline article. And, of course, they're just reporting on some studies that have come back that were commissioned by Congress. But here's what the headline says. New studies show pundits are wrong about Russian social media involvement in U.S. politics. So the pundits that you've been listening to on the news are wrong about the amount of involvement that the Russians had in our 2016 election. And the lead just says, far from being a sophisticated propaganda campaign, it was small, amateurish, and mostly unrelated to the 2016 election. I mean, the figures on this are almost hard to believe. It looks like over about a 3-year period from 2015 to 2017, that main firm, which is the Internet Research Agency, you remember that one? That's the one, that's the Russian firm that kind of ran their entire social media campaign. You know what they spent over those 3 years, 2015 to 2017?
What?
Less than $75,000 total. Total, over 3 years. That's across Facebook, Instagram, other places. You know, the kind of ads that they were serving. I mean, by the way, the article goes through all this because there were a couple of really in-depth studies, like I said, that were commissioned by Congress that have now come back, and they're covering what's covered in the reports. So in other words, the nation isn't just, making this up. They're saying, okay, this is what the folks that Congress hired to go and investigate this and prepare reports. These are their conclusions. And basically, the numbers are really small. The scale is almost non-existent, okay, averaging something like $25,000 total per year. That's only a couple of grand a month in advertisements. Mm-hmm. I mean, exactly how many people could they possibly have reached? And, of course, they've got all the numbers on that. They know exactly who was reached. It's very small numbers, particularly in states that were actually in play in the election. So you'd think if they were really trying to affect the election, they would have targeted all their money on the states that were in play versus blasting it out across the board. Now, the other thing I think is interesting is they get into some of what the most popular different memes and posts and things that were put out there by the Internet Research Agency were. And again, we've told you this before, and that is that they weren't necessarily directly related to the election. They were more of a generalist, a generalized angst that was being stirred up by some of these posts. For example, I think the most popular one of all featured a gun-toting Yosemite Sam, just kind of a very generalized, anti-government, anti-state power, state control mindset there. Another one said on it, like if you believe in Jesus. So, I mean, that's not highly political, or it shouldn't be.
So how do you know if you've been targeted by an ad from Russia?
Well, again, you can go online and find that they've got, the exact ads, so you can look at them and see were you influenced by it. But I love this point because, how do we know if we've been targeted? I mean, the Russians aren't that crafty, by the way. You look at these ads, it's not like it's not like they hypnotize you and make you believe something you didn't believe. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's something that the nation actually gets into. And I want you to go out there and check this article out. It's about 10 or 12 pages, so it's a long read. But one of the things they get into is just how insulting everybody is, particularly towards African Americans, because they say, well, what the Russians did in our election totally affected the African American vote, as though African American people are stupid and easily duped, right? I mean, isn't that, and look, I'm not saying this is the nation, but isn't that the story that they're telling you, is that these poor black people couldn't think for themselves, and they saw one internet meme or two internet memes, and all of a sudden their minds were changed. They were hypnotized. They couldn't even think for themselves. It's nonsense, and it's insulting to those people. So, but that's the kind of stuff you're dealing with, and we keep trying to bring it to your attention, because if you listen to anybody in the mainstream media, they make it sound like there was this huge effort by the Russians to undermine our democracy and affect the outcome of our election. And the reality is that's just not what happened. That just isn't there. Well, I don't know if either of y'all got a chance to watch 60 Minutes last night, but this is one of the best 60 Minutes I've seen in quite a while.
Doggone it, I missed it.
Yeah, I mean, they had all kinds of stuff going on last night. From Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's interview with Anderson Cooper. Well, by the way, Anderson didn't sound very good. I think he must have a cold or something. But anyway, that interview was fascinating because she really never disappoints. She's always going to say something stupid. And she's back to tippy tops. She's back to using tippy tops as a descriptive. When you're talking about the tippy tops, as though that's like an official economic term. Like, I learned that in college. I learned that when I got my degree. When you're talking about the very top, in order to help people to understand what you're talking about, you're talking about the very tops. You just to make that clear, you say the tippy top, so they don't get confused when you say the top.
I think it's tippity top.
Is it tippity top?
I think she says tippy tops, but the proper term is tippity top.
Oh, bippity boppity boo, bippity boppity boo. Oh, we can have a lot of fun with this. We should have our own little singing thing going on here. Sometimes we'll do that. Sometimes we do just break into song. But, she had a lot of interesting things to say. Then they had the president of Egypt on, and they just absolutely ambushed him. I want to tell you all about that. And then they had a very interesting kind of an out there segment at the end that we're not going to have time to cover because we've got too much of a fun out there segment to cover with you. But let's jump right into what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had to say to Anderson Cooper. And this is one in particular. Pay attention to what she's saying here, because she's going to put you on a forced death march. You are going to do what she says, whether you like it or not. And here's how she's going to change your life.
You're talking about zero carbon emissions, no use of fossil fuels within 12 years?
That is the goal. It's ambitious. And
how is that possible? You're talking about everybody having to drive an electric car?
It's going to require a lot of rapid change that we don't even conceive as possible right now. What is the problem with trying to push our technological capacities to the furthest extent possible?
Why don't we just have a Chinese cultural revolution like they did back during Mao Zedong's days? And why don't we kill off 40 or 60 million people? Because I know it's going to be difficult, but we need to push ourselves forward. I mean, just listen to this lady. She hasn't ever done anything in her own life. I mean, I think she's been a bartender or a server. That's the extent of what she's accomplished. But now she's got it all figured out at 28 years old, and she's going to tell you what to do. And I tell you what, if you like a gasoline car, too bad, because this is going to be a difficult time of radical change that you are going to have to accept. Now,
she could produce the kind of rapid change that has made Venezuela what it is today.
There you go. That's right. How about some of that? How about some rapid change in Cuba or something? Now, what underlies all this is she wants to radically increase taxes. And she gets right into that when Anderson Cooper asks her basically, how in the world would you pay for this?
People are going to have to start paying their fair share in taxes. You look at our tax rates back in the 60s, and when you have a progressive tax rate system, your tax rate, let's say from $0 to $75,000 may be 10% or 15%, etc. But once you get to like the tippy tops, on your $10 millionth dollar, sometimes you see tax rates as high as 60 or 70%. That doesn't mean all $10 million are taxed at an extremely high rate, but it means that as you climb up this ladder, you should be contributing more.
Oh, thank you. Don't you love it when she mansplains to us? It doesn't mean that every dollar is taxed at that rate. Look, lady, you probably never even paid any real taxes because you never made any real money. Okay, but you just know you've got this all figured out and you're just going to tell us all what to do. There was a lot more to that interview. Interestingly enough, I found that 60 Minutes didn't make it very easily accessible. And I think that's because she looks so bad. Every time she's interviewed, she looks like a fool. And so they haven't made it easy for you to go in there and see that. They've actually put her in a pretty good light. Is that the music? Like that's the end of the third segment? How can that be? It's 12:46.
I wanted to hear more tippy
Time flies when you're having
How can
fun.
that be? I mean, we haven't talked about el-Sisi. I mean, I had 4 clips for el-Sisi. Oh,
can we hear one of them
This is breaking
next?
my heart, guys.
Right.
This is breaking my heart. I mean, I don't even know what to do. Scott Pelley on 60 Minutes, I'll just tell you, totally whitewashed the Muslim Brotherhood. and basically tried to say it was some kind of a civic organization made up of mostly doctors and lawyers and middle-class people. As we well know from having interviewed a number of experts in this area, the Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organization bent on worldwide jihad, and thankfully somebody like President el-Sisi is standing up to it.
Welcome back to the Morgan Streetman Show. It is time to go out there. Are we going to have a chance to listen to any of the previous clips you were excited about, or we're saving for next week?
We're going to listen to them. We got to come back to them next week. That's how excited I was. But we are going to listen to one of them. This will be the whitewash, since I set this one up a little bit. Gotcha. And this is the whitewash of the Muslim Brotherhood by 60 Minutes reporter Scott Pelley. So listen to what he has to say about what the Muslim Brotherhood is.
The extremists, as he calls them, made up Egypt's largest political party, the Muslim Brotherhood. The Brotherhood is controversial. Its stated goal is peaceful pursuit of Islamic government, but over its 90 years, members have committed violence. The Brotherhood was one of Egypt's largest education, charity, and healthcare associations. Many members are middle class, academics, doctors, and lawyers.
Yeah, don't forget Fidel Castro was a lawyer too, okay? So just because somebody's a doctor or a lawyer, that doesn't give them some kind of,
moral compass.
Exactly. All right, so now we're going to go out there. And this out there segment is inspired by the Sarge. Because when I was on Friday, the Sarge was saying, the Chinese just landed on the dark side of the moon. Did you catch that? They shot a rocket up there. They sent a probe down. The probe landed, and it drops off a rover. Which, you can go out there and you can look at the photographs that the rover's already taken, although I have seen some things that appear to be computer simulations that they're calling photographs, but nevertheless, you can go out there and see what do appear to be at least some real photographs of what's supposed to be the dark side of the moon. Now, Sarge says, what's on the dark side of the moon? And I mean, who knows, right? I thought the moon was made out of cheese, so I don't know. Maybe some dip or crackers? I don't know. What is on the dark side of the moon? Well, if you go out there and you explore some of the things that people say, they say everything from alien bases to Nazi bases to U.S. moon bases out there, giant mining operations, and just all kinds of stuff could be on the dark side. That the side of the moon that faces the Earth that we see is always the same. And of course, the dark side of the moon isn't necessarily dark per se. It's just dark to us because we can't see it. So it's not
not illuminated by the sun. Is that right?
Well,
it's not.
Yeah, it can be. Absolutely, it can be illuminated by the sun. Depends on where where it is in orbit around the Earth and stuff. But the point is that it's not dark like as though you get there and everything's just dark. But, it kind of brings to mind this moon exploration. At least it brought to my mind in a kind of an out there sense of, well, what is the moon really? Because, the moon itself is just a very strange thing. And y'all are both looking at me like, what do you mean? Well, the moon's always up there. When I go out at night, the moon's up there and it's pretty. And okay, yeah, but should it be there? Should the moon be where it is? Now, that's a question that if you really want to look into it, it gets very deep because the moon is a little bit too big and a little bit too close. It shouldn't be where it is. Okay, now you can look into the science of this.
I know what you're saying. The gravitational pull is just so. If it was just a smidge closer, we'd suck it right into the Earth.
Well, and if it wasn't exactly where it was, we wouldn't even have any eclipses. The solar eclipse and the not really the lunar eclipse, but the solar eclipse in particular is only happens the way it does because from our perception, the moon and the sun are the exact same size in the sky. Everything's very well laid out, in other words, for just these right kinds of signs and things to occur. Now, when we went up for the Apollo program, they say Apollo 8 was the first guys that ever saw the dark side of the moon. Okay, so they flew around the moon. Now, starting with Apollo 11, what we started doing is we started firing part of the probes after we were leaving the moon into the moon just to see what happened. And one of the things that always strikes me is that the moon seems to have a lot of dust on it, but I can't tell what's under that dust because when things hit the moon, if you look at the craters will be very, very, very wide, but it's not very deep. So they'll be, 160, 170 miles wide, but 8 miles deep. Now, why is that? So when we were firing the parts of the space program, the jettisoning parts of the shuttle back into the moon during the Apollo 11, 12, 13, 14 missions, what we found, and you can look this up in Popular Science, is that the moon actually rang like a bell. It actually rang like a bell, and over a long period of time, it reverberated like that, just like a bell does.
That's actual.
As though it was hollow. That's not the actual moon. Okay. That is an actual bell. That's an actual bell, but not the actual moon. So that brings to mind, what is the moon? Well, I wanted to share with you, and hopefully we'll have time to get through all this, but I wanted to share a little segment by Dr. Grady McMurtry, and he sounds like he's talking to a room full of college students, so hopefully you'll appreciate some of that. But he's got some really interesting stuff to tell us about the moon.
The moon is moving away from the Earth at a staggeringly fast rate. 2 inches a year. Come on, 2 inches a year. Aren't you staggered? You're not? Well, you should be. Think with me for just a second. Today, you don't have to believe me. Today, you can prove this in a laptop computer, desktop computer at home or the office. The moon is moving away at 2 inches per year. Now, do any of you remember something called the law of gravity? And the law of gravity says basically that as two objects get closer together, there's a stronger and stronger pull together. Is that right? Now, it's an inverse square law. You half the distance, you quadruple the force, and so forth. But you plug the formula into a laptop computer today, and you can prove to yourself, think with me, if the moon is moving away at 2 inches per year now, well, if I go back 1 year, it would be 2 inches closer, correct? Another year would be 2 inches closer. But as the moon starts to come back towards the Earth, well, then the force of gravity starts to increase. Is that correct? And the rate at which the moon comes back gets faster and faster, correct? Now, again, as I said, you can prove this in a laptop computer. If you go back in time, the moon would come back in, spiral in, and hit the Earth 1.4 billion years ago. Let's think about this, too. If the moon comes back towards the Earth and the force of gravity gets in, ever larger, well, what's it going to do? Well, what is the major physical impact of the moon upon the Earth? It is tides, correct? Now, if the moon starts to come back towards the Earth, well, let's think about this. If the moon comes back towards the Earth, the tides would get higher and higher, correct? Right? Now, if you go back 1/2 billion years, and again, just on a laptop computer, well, the tides on Earth would rise 1 mile high twice a day.
Whoo! So you see what he's basically saying is that the moon is far too close to the Earth, particularly given the fact that for some reason the moon is moving away from the Earth. So if the current state of things is what's been going on for a long period of time, then that means that the Earth couldn't be the 4 billion years old that everybody tells us that it is, because the moon would have crashed back into the Earth within about 1 billion years. And hey, within 500 million years back into the past, the tides would be 1 mile high. I mean, that's just completely impossible to even imagine. So what is the moon? Now, we can't answer this question for you as we sit here today, unfortunately, but I'll tell you what, it's not as easy of an answer as you might think. It is not made out of cheese. So, Pat George, I know that's where you were going with it.
That's disappointing to me.
But you got to go out there and check out some of this really interesting stuff about the moon. And now, on that note, we're going to leave you with one of our favorite songs mentioning the dark side of the moon. So we'll see you next week, folks. I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And don't forget to exercise your brain at least once a week.